They say storms only reveal what's been hidden in the dark. A devoted husband paraded as the perfect family man, yet a mother's trembling hands held the proof that his mask was slipping. One night, my daughter called me, her voice breaking through the roar of thunder, begging me to save her newborn son. Minutes later, a scream split the line, and then silence. That very man who preached loyalty had abandoned her in the heart of a Texas storm. The world called him caring. Neighbors defended him as honorable, but I knew the truth. What kind of man leaves a woman to give birth on the side of the road? What kind of family protects lies instead of life? Tonight, you'll hear what I heard, see what I saw, and decide for yourself. Would you stay silent, or would you fight? If this story grips you, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. That's the fuel that keeps these stories alive. The rain was hammering against the roof like it wanted to drown the whole town. I was folding laundry in the dim glow of my kitchen lamp, trying to quiet my thoughts, when the phone rang. The name flashing on the screen froze my breath, Emily. My hands shook as I picked up. "Mom," she whispered, the wind cutting her words into shards. "I'm so cold. Please, save my baby." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Where are you?" I cried. Static hissed, then her broken voice. "Ryan left me at a bus stop." I pressed the phone harder to my ear, desperate, but only fragments came through: pain, fear, then a scream so sharp it split the night. And then, nothing. The call was gone. I dialed again and again, but each time the operator's voice told me the line was no longer available. My knees buckled. I could still hear her last words echoing inside me. I grabbed the old raincoat from its hook and my late husband's truck keys. I didn't even bother with shoes, just ran into the storm. The rain stung my face. The pickup roared to life, headlights dull against the sheets of water. My only thought was to find her. First, I drove to the hospital, where she was supposed to have her checkup. The nurse at the desk shook her head. Emily had been discharged that morning. Her husband picked her up, she said. My stomach turned. If Ryan had taken her, why was she alone in the storm? Why was my daughter begging for her life? I sped down the highway, stopping at every bus shelter, stepping out into the downpour, shouting her name. The first stop empty. The second, nothing but rain. My voice was swallowed by the wind, and still, I drove on, praying to see her before the storm erased her completely. The wipers screeched against the glass, barely cutting through the curtain of rain as I crept down the highway. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, every nerve in me stretched to the breaking point. I pulled over at each bus stop, jumped down into the storm, and shouted Emily's name until my throat burned. Only the wind answered. At the first shelter, nothing but puddles glistening under the streetlight. At the second, an empty bench, rainwater dripping from its rusted frame. My heart sank deeper with every mile, yet something inside pushed me forward. I whispered a prayer into the storm, begging God to let me find her alive. And then, as the headlights swept across the third stop, I saw it, a flash of beige against the asphalt, a coat I knew as well as my own hands. The maternity coat I had bought Emily months ago, now crumpled in the mud, soaked and heavy with rain. My breath caught. I stumbled out of the truck, the rain slamming down like nails, and I bent to pick it up. Cold water streamed between my fingers, and I pressed the fabric to my chest as though it could tell me where she was. Beside it lay her phone, shattered across the concrete, as if someone had hurled it to the ground. My knees buckled, and I staggered forward, whispering her name. Then, in the far corner of the shelter, a shape stirred. Emily. My daughter, curled up small as a child, clutching a bundle so fragile my mind refused to believe it was real. I rushed to her, kneeling in the freezing water. Her face was chalk white, her lips tinged blue. In her trembling arms, a newborn, silent and limp, skin pale as wax. "Emily!" I cried, wrapping my arms around both of them, my tears mingling with the rain. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here." I pulled a towel from my bag and wrapped it around the baby, pressing his tiny body to my chest. He was frighteningly still. No cry, no squirm, only the faintest breath warming my hand. I stripped off my jacket and draped it over Emily's shaking shoulders. "Hold on," I begged, brushing the wet hair from her eyes. She tried to speak, her voice no more than a thread. "Mom, don't let us die. He left me. He left us." Her head dropped against my shoulder. Panic surged through me. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers slipping, dialing 911 with a desperation I had never known. "Please, send help!" I shouted above the roar of the storm. "My daughter, my grandson, they're freezing. They're not breathing right. We're at the westbound stop, number 12. Hurry." The operator asked questions I could barely hear. I repeated the location over and over, as though the words themselves might summon the ambulance faster. I carried them into the truck, cradling Emily against me while the baby lay against my chest, wrapped tight in the towel. My own body shivered, but I pressed them closer, willing my warmth into their fragile skin. Emily's eyelids fluttered, her lips moving. "I don't want to die," she whispered. Her words broke me, but I forced my voice steady. "You won't. I won't let you. I'm right here." Minutes stretched into years until red lights flashed in the distance. The wail of sirens pierced the storm, and relief flooded me so hard I nearly collapsed. The paramedics rushed in, lifting Emily and the baby with urgent hands, murmuring reassurances. "They're alive," one said firmly. I staggered back, soaked and trembling, my hands still empty of the weight I had carried. I climbed into my truck and followed the ambulance into the night, clinging to one thought: my daughter had called for me, and I had found her. The waiting room lights flickered overhead, cold and relentless, bright and merciless, that clenched my chest. My clothes were still damp, clinging to my skin, but I didn't feel the chill. All I could hear was the echo of the paramedic's voice telling me they were alive. Alive, but fragile. Hours crawled by with the sound of footsteps and machines behind closed doors. Every time a nurse pushed through, I jumped, searching their faces for answers that never came. I pressed my palms together until they ached, whispering silent prayers, the kind you only learn when your child is fighting for her life. Finally, the door creaked open. A doctor in pale blue scrubs stepped out, his expression grave but steady. "She's stable," he said, his tone clipped, like each word weighed too much. "Your daughter is exhausted, but she made it through. The baby has hypothermia. He's weak, but he's breathing." My knees nearly gave out. I nodded, unable to form words, tears blurring my vision as I clutched the edge of the chair. Stable, breathing. That was all I needed. But the doctor's gaze lingered, and I braced myself. "She's carrying emotional trauma. She keeps repeating the same thing. Someone left her. Ryan." My breath hitched. He didn't say more, only patted my shoulder before disappearing back inside. When I finally stepped into her room, the hum of machines filled the silence. Emily lay pale against the hospital sheets, her hair plastered to her forehead, her arms trembling as she cradled the baby swaddled in blankets. Her eyes flickered open and met mine. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking like thin glass. I rushed to her side, pressing her cold hand between mine. "You're safe now, both of you." She shook her head weakly, her lips quivering. "He left me, Mom, at the bus stop, because I talked back." The words cut deeper than the storm ever could. My Emily, my gentle girl who had never raised her voice to anyone, now broken into believing she deserved abandonment. I felt fury crawl through my veins, but I swallowed it down, forcing calm into my voice. "Don't you ever believe that," I whispered, brushing her damp hair back. "You did nothing wrong." She pressed her forehead against mine, her tears soaking into my skin. "I thought we'd die there." Her shoulders shook as she tried to quiet the sobs, not wanting to wake the baby. I stayed by her bed for 3 endless days, refusing to leave. Nurses brought trays of food I barely touched. My world had narrowed to the steady beep of the monitor and the faint rise and fall of her chest. But not once did Ryan appear. Not a phone call, not even a shadow in the doorway. On the 3rd day, my anger boiled over. I stepped into the hallway, dialed his number with shaking hands. It rang, then silence. Seconds later, a message buzzed onto my screen. His words were sharp, cutting. "Stay out of my family's business." Family. That single word made my blood burn. Family doesn't leave a woman bleeding in the rain. Family doesn't turn away from a child's first breath. I wanted to scream, to march to his door and drag him here, but when I turned back and saw Emily asleep, her arm curled protectively around her son, I knew my rage had to wait. She needed me steady, not reckless. On the 4th day, the doctor finally signed the papers. Emily's body was weak, but she insisted she could not stay another night. I helped her dress slowly, my hands steadying her trembling frame. She clutched the baby close, her eyes clouded with fear but edged with determination. Together we left the hospital, the storm behind us, but a heavier storm waiting ahead. Before we walked out, Emily asked the nurse quietly, "Can I have a copy of everything in my chart?" Her voice was shaky, but it was the first time I saw her take back a piece of control. As we stepped into the sunlight, I promised myself I would not let Ryan's silence drown out her voice again. The morning air was heavy, the kind of stillness that makes your skin prickle before something breaks. Emily had only been home one night, still fragile, her baby sleeping in the cradle beside her, when the pounding on my front door rattled the walls. I wiped my hands on my apron and opened it, only to find Evelyn, Ryan's mother, standing tall on my porch. Her hair was pulled into a severe knot, her mouth twisted into a line sharp enough to cut glass. Behind her were three neighbors, arms folded, faces curious and judgmental. Evelyn's voice carried like a gavel striking wood. "We've been looking for Emily for days. She's sick, postpartum depression. She ran away and you've been hiding her." The words struck like a slap. My Emily, who nearly froze to death because her husband abandoned her, now painted as unstable, unfit, dangerous. I opened my mouth to fight, but before I could, Mrs. Carter from 2 houses down leaned forward, her tone dripping with pity. "I've seen Ryan out every night, searching for his wife. Poor man. Doesn't she owe him a chance to raise his family in peace?" My stomach twisted. Pity. They pitied him, the man who left her to die. My fists clenched so tightly my nails bit into my palms. "Pity?" I shouted, my voice shaking with fury. "That man left my daughter in the rain, giving birth alone. Do you hear me? Alone." The crowd shifted uneasily, but Evelyn didn't waver. She stepped forward, her perfume sickly sweet, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "Emily is not in her right mind," she said coolly. "If you continue to meddle, I'll call the police. Both of you could be taken in for mental evaluation. Is that what you want, Nora?" Before I could spit fire back, footsteps echoed behind her. Ryan appeared, stepping down from his silver SUV like a man arriving at church. He wore a crisp white shirt, a box of formula in one hand, his face calm, even kind. He gave the neighbors a solemn nod, then turned to me with a practiced sigh. "I don't want trouble. I just want my wife and my son home. Please, let them come back where they belong." His tone was soft, almost pleading, but his eyes met mine with a glare so cold it burned. My voice trembled with rage, but before I could unleash it, Emily's voice floated from behind me. "Mom." I spun around. She stood in the doorway, pale, her baby clutched against her chest, eyes red but steady. "It's okay. Let me go." Her words cracked, but she forced them out. "If they keep shouting here, it'll hurt you. I can't let them hurt you too." My heart broke into pieces. I wanted to grab her, to lock the door, to scream until the neighbors saw the truth. But Emily's face, my timid girl, now trying to shield me, stole the strength from my legs. She stepped past me, her baby held close, and walked toward Ryan. He opened the car door with a smile for the crowd, the perfect image of a doting husband. But when his gaze slid over me, it was sharp, triumphant, daring me to resist. I stood frozen, my lips pressed into a hard line, my throat burning with words I could not force out. Evelyn smirked, her victory written in the curve of her mouth, while the neighbors nodded as if balance had been restored. The silver SUV pulled away slowly, the baby's faint cry echoing as it disappeared down the street. I stayed on the porch long after the taillights vanished, the damp wind tugging at my dress. My arms ached as if still cradling Emily and her child, but they were gone, taken back into that house where I knew danger waited. The murmurs of the neighbors drifted away, leaving only silence, heavy and cruel. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling the rage simmer inside, no longer just fear but something sharper. They thought I had lost. They thought I was powerless. But as I stood alone on that porch, I swore to myself that this would not be the end. Ryan could fool the neighbors, but he would not fool me. That night, I sat in the silence of my living room, the echo of the SUV's engine still burning in my ears. I stared at the empty cradle where Emily had laid her baby just hours before, my fists trembling in my lap. The neighbors had turned their backs. Ryan had stolen my daughter under their approving eyes, and I had nothing. No proof, no allies, just the memory of her broken voice begging me not to fight. But a mother does not stop. I picked up the shattered phone I had found at the bus stop. Its screen splintered like my own heart, and I drove straight to my brother's garage. Mark was hunched over his workbench when I walked in, the smell of oil and metal thick in the air. His head lifted at the sight of me, his eyes narrowing at the wrecked phone in my hand. "Please," I whispered, setting it in front of him. "See if there's anything left. Messages? Videos? Anything." He turned it over slowly, his expression grim. "It'll be tough, but I'll try." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "We need more than this. He has everyone fooled. I need to show the truth." Mark's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then we put eyes in his house." The thought made my stomach twist, but I nodded. Desperation will push you where fear never dared. That Saturday, we followed them from a distance. Ryan played the devoted husband, guiding Emily into the supermarket, pushing a cart with a smile, greeting neighbors like an angel. I watched through the windshield, nails biting into my palms, while Mark slipped through the back door of their house with tools tucked under his jacket. Minutes dragged like hours until the buzz of my phone lit up. Done. Cameras hidden in a potted plant, a microphone tucked behind the curtain by the baby's crib. That night, we sat together in Mark's garage, the glow of his old laptop spilling across our faces. The feed flickered on, and there she was, my daughter sitting on the couch with the baby in her arms, her face pale, her eyes hollow. I pressed a hand to my mouth, then the door slammed open. Ryan stepped in, shirt wrinkled, jaw tight. He threw a grocery bag onto the floor, the contents spilling across the tiles. "I work all day and come home to this mess? You're useless," he barked. Emily flinched, but said nothing, holding her son closer. My heart throbbed as if every insult had been carved into me. He pointed a finger at her face, his voice cutting like a whip. "If it weren't for me, you two would starve. Why can't you be more like Sophie?" The name struck me like lightning. Sophie? I had never heard it before, but the way he spat it, like a ghost he wished lived in my daughter's place, made bile rise in my throat. Emily's head lowered, her lips trembling, but she did not answer. She only rocked her baby, her silence louder than any scream. Hours later, the camera caught her again, this time standing on the balcony in the dim light, humming weakly to the crying infant. Her song was broken, her voice shaking with exhaustion. Ryan appeared, his shadow slicing across the screen. He didn't shout, "Not this time." His words were colder. "Step outside again and don't expect me to come back for you." He closed the door with a slam, leaving her clutching the child under the thin glow of a streetlight. I slammed the laptop shut, unable to watch another second, my chest burning with helpless fury. Mark's voice broke the silence, steady and grim. "Now you've seen it. This is only the beginning. He's hiding more. I can feel it. That name, Sophie, there's something there." I nodded, tears streaming unchecked. "Then we dig deeper, whatever it takes." Because now I had proof. The mask Ryan wore was cracking, and I would not stop until the world saw the monster beneath. The next morning, I drove the same highway where I had found Emily, the memory of her soaked coat and shattered phone burning in my chest. I stopped at every gas station and diner, clutching a photo of her in that beige maternity coat, asking strangers if they had seen anything that night. Most shook their heads, eyes full of pity, as if I were some desperate woman chasing ghosts. My voice grew hoarse, but I would not stop. At a dusty truck stop on the edge of town, I found an older man wiping down the windshield of his rig. His hair was silver, his jacket frayed at the seams. I held up the photo with trembling hands. "Sir, please, did you see her?" "That night, the storm. Around 10 o'clock. He frowned, squinting at the picture, then paused. "That night? Rained so hard I could barely see the road. Thought I caught someone by a pole near the westbound stop. Figured it was a broken sign." My heart jolted. Do you have a dashcam?" I whispered, afraid to hope. He studied me, then nodded slowly. "Maybe. My nephew keeps the files on his laptop. If you remember the time, we'll check." 2 hours later, I was sitting in the back corner of the truck stop diner, the storm still thrumming in my bones. The nephew opened the laptop, scrolling through grainy clips until I nearly shouted, "There! Stop! 10:42!" And then the screen froze my blood. Ryan's silver SUV pulled under the shelter of the stop, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. The driver's door flew open. Ryan stepped out, dark raincoat clinging to his frame, and leaned into the passenger side. His mouth moved, shouting words we couldn't hear over the roar, then his hand jerked, pointing into the night. The door slammed shut. In seconds, the SUV roared away, tires hissing against the flooded pavement. And there she was, Emily, stumbling out into the storm, clutching her belly, collapsing onto the ground as the lights faded. A sob tore from my throat. I covered my mouth with shaking hands, unable to breathe. The trucker looked away, giving me the dignity of silence. The nephew copied the file to a small USB and handed it to me. He scribbled the exact time 10:42 p.m. on a sticky note and pressed it into my palm, as if to anchor the truth. The weight of that tiny drive felt impossibly heavy. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You don't know what you've given me." That night, I sat at Mark's workbench as he loaded the video onto his computer. The screen glowed with the moment I could never forget. Ryan driving away, Emily crumpled in the rain. Mark leaned back, his jaw tight. "This is it," he said. The nail in his coffin. I stared at the image, tears running unchecked. My daughter abandoned in her most desperate hour, and no one but a stranger's dashcam to prove it. I clutched the USB in my palm like a weapon, my vow hardening with every beat of my heart. But as I sat there, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about anger anymore. It was about truth. The neighbors could whisper, Evelyn could spin her lies, Ryan could polish his mask, but now I had light strong enough to pierce it all. I looked at Mark, his eyes steady, and whispered, "We're not done. Not yet. Sophie, his lies, his money, everything will come out. But this is where it starts." And for the first time since that night in the storm, I felt the faint stirrings of hope. Hope carved from rain and lightning, caught in the lens of a stranger's dashcam, preserved forever. That video became my anchor. I played it over and over, memorizing the second Ryan drove away, the way Emily collapsed into the flood of rain. But I knew the storm was bigger than one night. There was a name Ryan spat like a weapon, Sophie, and I needed to know who she was. So, I went digging. I asked questions in whispered tones at the laundromat, the diner, anywhere gossip ran quicker than truth. Finally, an older woman folding sheets told me, "Sophie Morgan lives over in the new luxury apartments by 5th Street. Dresses like she owns the city, but no one knows how she pays for it." My chest tightened. A luxury apartment? Ryan's salary barely covered their small house, yet he could bankroll another woman's life? That evening, I parked across from the apartments, hidden in the shadow of a closed store. The silver SUV pulled in right on time, polished, gleaming, the same one from the dashcam. My hands trembled as I lifted my phone. Ryan stepped out, smoothing his shirt, and moments later she appeared. Sophie. Young, striking, dressed in a silk dress that caught the light even in the dusk. She smiled, leaned into him as though he were hers alone. He brushed a kiss against her forehead, his hand pressing at the small of her back before leading her inside. My stomach twisted. I hit record. The lens caught everything: the embrace, the intimacy, the door closing behind them. Later that night, I showed Emily the video. She sat hunched on the edge of my couch, her baby in her lap, her face drained of color. I pressed play and set the phone on the table. She stared at the screen until tears blurred her eyes. "I knew it," she whispered. "I saw messages once. He laughed when I asked, said I was crazy." Her shoulders shook as sobs tore free, muffled against the baby's blanket. I pulled her close, holding her as she cried. "You're not crazy," I murmured. "He island, and now we have proof." The next morning I walked into the steel and glass tower where Ryan worked. The receptionist blinked in surprise when I asked for the manager. Soon I was sitting across from Mr. Jacobs, a stern man with salt in his hair, and a younger woman named Linda, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. I laid the USB and my phone on the table. "You need to see this," I said, my voice steady though my hands trembled. They watched the dashcam footage, the hidden camera recordings, the video of Ryan with Sophie. Jacobs leaned back, his jaw tight. Linda scrolled through spreadsheets on her laptop, her voice cutting through the silence. "There's already suspicion. $150,000 missing in the past 3 months. Transfers routed to an account under the name Sophie Morgan." She tapped the screen, numbers glowing red. Rent payment, designer clothes, spa package, all tied to that account. She slid a form across the table and asked for Emily's signature, giving the company legal permission to share the records with investigators. Emily signed without hesitation, her hand steady for the first time in weeks. Jacobs rubbed his temples, exhaling through his nose. He's been playing us for fools. His gaze shifted to me, a flicker of shame in his eyes. Thank you for bringing this forward. We'll suspend him immediately and open an investigation. I nodded. Though my throat was tight, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. When I left that building, the sky was heavy with clouds again, but this time the storm belonged to Ryan. He thought he could bury Emily under lies, paint himself as the victim, keep Sophie in silk while my daughter froze at a bus stop. But now the walls around him were cracking, and I swore with every step I took across that gray sidewalk that I would not stop until they collapsed completely. It didn't take long for Ryan to strike back. 2 days after Jacobs told me he was suspended, my phone buzzed nonstop with messages. His face was plastered all over Facebook, his post shared hundreds of times. A photo of him holding the baby, a soft filter smoothing the edges, music swelling in the background. The caption read like a confession written in honey. I just want to be a good husband and father, but my wife's illness and the interference of others have painted me as a villain. My chest burned as I scrolled. Every like, every comment calling him a saint, a devoted man fighting for his broken family. Neighbors who had once smiled at me now wrote words that cut deep. Poor Ryan. That woman's mother has always been controlling. Evelyn's name appeared in the comments beneath, her voice as sharp in writing as it was in person. She posted a photo of a medical document, a neat hospital logo in the corner, claiming Emily had been diagnosed with postpartum depression. The words leapt off the screen. Unstable, unsafe, unfit. I could barely breathe. That paper was their weapon now, turning lies into truth in the eyes of strangers. Emily sat beside me, clutching her baby, her hands shaking as she saw her own name branded on the page. "Mom, they'll never believe me," she whispered. That night, the local news carried a different story. A short segment about a clinic raided by FBI agents. The anchor's voice was steady, almost casual, as he described dozens of falsified medical documents sold to anyone willing to pay. The camera zoomed in on the seized papers, and my heart stopped. The logo. The same logo Evelyn had posted. I grabbed my phone, snapping a picture of the screen, sending it to Mark and to Harper, the attorney I had contacted quietly the week before. "It's fake," I wrote with trembling hands. Within minutes, Harper called me back. Her tone was low but sharp, like a blade unsheathed. "This changes everything. If we prove that certificate false, the foundation of his entire defense collapses." Emily leaned forward, whispering, "Give me the papers. I'll sign whatever it takes to let you fight this in court." Her voice was quiet but resolute. Mark came to my kitchen the next morning, slamming a stack of printed documents onto the table. He pointed at the bottom corner of Evelyn's post. "See this number? It doesn't exist." I checked with the health registry myself. That clinic never had authority to issue medical records. It was shut down last week for fraud. He looked at me, his eyes dark but steady. They went too far. I pressed a hand over my mouth, the room spinning. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight shift, the tide turning. Still, Ryan kept feeding the fire. More videos appeared online, him spooning medicine into the baby's mouth, him folding laundry with exaggerated care, clips edited together like a movie, music swelling as he kissed Emily's forehead in her sleep. But I had seen the uncut footage. I had heard his voice spit venom hours after those staged moments. The world believed his play, but I knew the stage would crumble once the truth was unveiled. That evening, I gathered everything: dashcam footage, hidden camera clips, bank statements Linda had provided, photos of him with Sophie, and now the proof of the forged document. I spread them across my kitchen table, the lamplight gleaming off the pages. My hands trembled as I stacked them into a single folder. For weeks, I had been fighting shadows, but now the shadows had faces, dates, signatures. I whispered to myself, my voice steady despite the fear twisting inside. "It's time." Emily watched from the couch, rocking her baby, her eyes tired but fierce. She asked quietly, "Do you think anyone will believe us?" I knelt beside her, placing my hand over hers. "They won't have a choice," I said. The folder in my arms felt heavier than stone, but inside it was the truth, sharpened like a blade. And I knew the next battle would be fought where lies and masks could no longer hide in court. The courthouse loomed gray against the sky, its stone steps slick from the morning rain. I walked beside Emily, her baby nestled in her arms, his tiny head tucked beneath a pale blue blanket. Her hands trembled, but her eyes stayed forward. Inside, the air was cold and sharp, heavy with whispers. We sat together at the long wooden bench, while Harper, our attorney, spread the documents across the table, her pen tapping like a clock counting down. "We have everything we need," she murmured. I nodded, though my stomach churned as though the walls themselves were pressing in. When the judge entered, the room hushed. Ryan appeared moments later, dressed in a tailored gray suit, his hair combed neatly. He looked calm, confident, a smile tugging at his lips as if the world still believed his performance. Evelyn followed close behind, her face stone, her black dress severe. And then Sophie, head bowed, her hands clenched in front of her, her presence like a shadow clinging to him. My chest tightened. Emily's grip on the baby faltered, and I reached for her hand, whispering, "You are not alone." The hearing began. Harper stood first, her voice ringing clear. She laid out the dashcam video, the hidden recordings, the financial statements, the forged certificate. Each piece of evidence flickered on the screen for the jury to see. The silence deepened with every frame, every number, every signature. When the dashcam played, showing Ryan leaving Emily at the bus stop in the storm, I heard gasps ripple through the room. Emily lowered her head, tears spilling silently onto her child's blanket. Ryan's lawyer rose slowly, adjusting his glasses. He did not deny the videos. He did not argue the transfers. Instead, Ryan himself stood, his tone steady, almost pleading. "I admit I made mistakes," he said, looking directly at the judge. "But I wasn't alone. My mother pushed me. Sophie orchestrated everything. I followed their orders." His voice carried across the courtroom, rehearsed and desperate. Evelyn shot to her feet, her voice sharp. "Liar, you said it was your plan. You made me—" The judge slammed her gavel, ordering silence, but the tension cracked open, spilling into every corner of the room. The jurors leaned forward, their pens frozen in mid-air, the room holding its breath. All eyes turned to Sophie. She sat stiff, her face pale, her knuckles white. The judge called her forward. Her heels clicked against the tile as she walked, each step heavy with dread. Harper handed her a phone, the same one Sophie had carried when she entered. The technician plugged it into the court system, and suddenly the screen lit up with messages, emails, recordings. Ryan's voice filled the room, instructing her to edit videos, to buy a medical certificate, to post lies on social media. His signature sprawled across documents, transferring money to her account. Sophie lifted her eyes at last, not at the judge, not at the jury, but at Emily. Her voice cracked, but held firm. "I was wrong. He used me. He lied to me just like he lied to her, but I won't protect him anymore." The courtroom erupted. Ryan's face drained of color, his jaw clenching as he shouted, "You promised!" The judge's gavel struck again, her voice thunderous. "Order," the jury whispered among themselves, the weight of the truth pressing down on every soul in that chamber. Harper gathered the last piece, the forged medical paper, and placed it before the judge. "This," she said, her voice steady, "is the final proof. Nothing about this man is real. Not his love, not his image, not his defense." The judge disappeared with the jury for deliberation. Minutes stretched like hours, every tick of the clock echoing like thunder. Emily clutched my hand so tightly it hurt, her eyes fixed on the door. At last the judge returned, her expression firm, her words cutting through the silence like a blade. "Ryan Morgan is guilty of domestic abuse, fraud, and falsification of medical documents. He is sentenced to 10 years in prison. His parental rights are revoked." Emily's sob broke free, raw and unrestrained, as she buried her face against her baby's blanket. My own tears fell silently, not from sorrow, but from the relief of truth finally breaking through. Ryan stood frozen, his mask shattered, his eyes hollow. Officers stepped forward, their hands gripping his arms, and for the first time, he had no words left to give. The month after the trial passed, like a strange dream. The house felt different, lighter, as if the walls themselves could finally breathe again. Morning sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, warm and golden, resting on the cradle where my grandson kicked and stretched his tiny hands toward the air. Emily sat at the table, her hair pulled back loosely, her face still pale but no longer haunted by shadows. For the first time in months, I saw a real smile curve her lips as she rocked him gently. "Mom," she said softly, her voice carrying both weariness and strength, I don't want our pain to end here. I want to turn it into something good, something that helps other women who feel trapped like I did. Her words filled me with both pride and sorrow. I poured coffee into her mug, my hands steady, and asked, "What do you have in mind?" She looked down at her son, then back at me. A foundation, a safe place for women and children who have nowhere to go, a place that gives them shelter and hope. She paused, then whispered the name she had been holding in her heart, Bright Haven, named after him. Because his life was almost stolen by the storm, but he is our light. Tears pricked my eyes. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Then we'll build it together. That week we cleared out the spare room, stacking boxes high against the walls, filling them with clothes, blankets, and baby supplies donated by neighbors who had watched the trial unfold. The same people who once whispered doubt behind our backs now knocked on our door with casseroles and envelopes of cash folded discreetly inside. Redemption came not in their words but in their actions, in the way they handed Emily bags of diapers and hugged her tightly before leaving. She received each gift with quiet gratitude, her strength growing each day. At night, I watched her work by the glow of her laptop, typing letters to local churches, community centers, even city officials. She wrote with determination I had never seen in her before. "My name is Emily Morgan," she began one draft, her fingers trembling slightly. "I survived manipulation, abandonment, and abuse. I'm still healing, but I want to help others find a way out before it's too late." She stopped to wipe her tears, then pressed on, her baby sleeping peacefully beside her. I stood in the doorway, my heart swelling, knowing she was no longer just surviving, she was rebuilding. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, the cicadas humming in the warm Texas air, Emily turned to me. "Do you think people will listen to us?" she asked quietly. I looked out across the fields, the horizon glowing with the last light of day. "They will," I said firmly, "because you speak with truth, and truth cannot be silenced forever." She leaned her head against my shoulder, and for a long moment, we just listened to the night, the weight of the past lifting, replaced by something steadier hope. When we held the first meeting for Bright Haven, only 6 women came. They carried babies on their hips, bruises hidden beneath long sleeves, voices hushed with fear. Emily welcomed them with open arms, her son cradled against her chest. She spoke gently, telling them, "I know what it feels like to be invisible, to believe no one will ever believe you. But you are not alone anymore." I watched their eyes fill with tears, watched their shoulders straighten as her words seeped into them like rain into dry soil. That night, after everyone left, Emily tucked her son into his crib and turned to me. "We're going to grow this, Mom. We're going to make it something bigger than both of us." I kissed her forehead, whispering, "Yes, we will." And now, as I share this with you, I ask, if you had the chance to turn your pain into light for someone else, would you take it? Would you risk being heard, even when silence feels safer? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your voice might be the spark someone else needs. And if this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. If you've lived through storms like this, share your experience in the comments. Your story could be the map that helps someone else escape. That is how we keep the light burning, not just for us, but for all who are still walking through their storm.